Hello and welcome to another episode of Intune.training, the place to learn how to use Microsoft Intune, the Steve and Adam Show, with Steve,
Adam.
and Adam, and Ben, and special guest Ravi. Hey Ravi, welcome back.
Hey Ravi.
Hi, thanks everyone for having me again.
Of course.
So Ravi, just for if this is the first time folks have seen you, please tell us who you are and things, and then we'll get rolling.
Cool. So my name is Ravi Kalwan. I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I've been working. I worked in different roles in the last 12 years, and worked in changing Microsoft management solution. Started working when it was called SMS 3.0 and helped customer upgrade to Service Pack 1, then go into SCCM Config Manager. So I've seen it going really from a simpler software to really, really complex, and now it's all integrated with cloud. So yeah.
Excellent.
Nice.
Well, so we've got a video that hopefully I'll actually release before this video comes out. Still waiting for the editor. Around co-management, and so this is the second in a series around getting cloud value, and we had another video that we talked about before where we met with Danny Guillory and just had a chat about we call it the big three, and we talked about tenant attach, co-management, and cloud management gateway, and being able to get cloud value out of your existing infrastructure and attaching to the cloud, and the whole better together story. And so last week we talked about co-management, and this week Ravi has come back to talk to us about tenant attach, and kind of show us how that is a separate, different cloud value option that you can add into your tenant. And I would even say to some degree it's probably a simpler, easy add-on, simpler than even co-management, because you just turn it on, but the value that it adds is significant. So let's jump in.
Cool. All right. So similar to last time, I do have a deck. It's not a deck that I prepared just for the session. This deck is most of the content of this deck is presented in past by Microsoft and in other sessions. Some of them came from Microsoft Ignite. So again, just disclaimer: this is the content of this deck has been presented by Microsoft in past. Cool. I'll present this. I'll start sharing my screen, present the deck, but also there's a lot of live demos as well. I'm going to get connected to my config manager environment and show you how it's really done up for the demo purpose. I went ahead and in preparation, I've removed the tenant attach capability so we can enable it and see what really happens at the back end. Just when you're talking about config manager, it's never going to be complete. It's never going to be interesting if you don't talk about the logs, right?
Yes.
What's happening in these different logs, these different entries in the logs, which just excites everyone.
Also, side note, Ravi, while you're opening up your slide deck, is everyone else very excited that CM Trace has been updated and it's now super fast?
Yay.
Yeah.
CM Trace has been updated?
Yeah, there's a new version of it that came out recently. It's it opens very large log files about 30% faster.
Nice.
Which excites me to no end.
It'd be awesome to see that available for Intune.
As a deployable thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
So just before I actually start talking about tenant attach, Steve, I do have a small package in Intune that I deploy to every machine that I provision using Autopilot that automatically copies that small CM trace, which is very, very useful.
I do the same thing.
Yeah. So
have you guys looked at using what is it called? Oh, the symbolic links for CM Trace. So I'm gonna take you down a different tangent for a minute here. This is a Mike Terrell trick here. So the default install for CM Trace when you install the config manager client is in C Windows CCM, but that's not in your path environment variable. And so if you want to get to CM Trace, you have to put in the path to get to it or create a shortcut or whatever. So historically, like, we've just copied a copy of CM Trace into C Windows System 32 so that you don't have to path it. But then it gets out of date because that, if it ever gets updated, it gets updated with the client install, and now you've got an out-of-date copy sitting in System 32. So you can create a symbolic link that will leave CMTrace in the original install location, but then create a virtual shortcut for it in Windows System 32, and then you just type CMTrace at, just hit Windows CMTrace, and it finds the right path to it, but it's always staying current with the client install.
So that's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Just
cool.
Linux things.
Okay, so just before I start talking about Tenant Attach, I just want to confirm that you guys can see my deck. Okay, cool. So simple, very simple. That says Tenant Attach, and yes, as Adam says, it is much simpler than what we talked about, the solution co-management. Again, the first thing, it goes next. Yeah, so this is similar to last time, a very, very, very high level architecture overview of what exactly is Tenant Attach. Tenant Attach is a feature in Config Manager. Once you enable it, it syncs the data between Intune and Config Manager. And the important bit that I want to bring it up here is, again, there's no client in here. In co-management, there is the data communication happening between the Intune tenant and the client. So client is supposed to directly go in and communicate back and forth from Intune. That's not the case. It's a direct communication of data between Config Manager service and Intune. That's it. And then once you enable it, starts getting capabilities. All right, cool. So this is a deck that was presented a while ago by in one of the Microsoft Ignite session, but this is still very, very useful. This talks about what happens at the backend. So in the backend, as you can see, Config Manager, once it is enabled, talks to a specific gateway service. What Microsoft has said in past is the gateway service is dedicatedly created to enable Tenant Attach capability, and the data gets stored, gets processed, and once it is stored and processed, it's then further sent to the device management service. The device management service in the stack on the left-hand side top is the Intune service. And once you log on to the console, Intune console, from any browser, endpoint.microsoft.com, you see the data that is actually coming from Config Manager. Now, it's not just the data that you can see. It's not just the Config Manager data that you can see from in the Intune Cloud Console, MEM Cloud Console. You can interact with that as well. When I say interact, there are Config Manager actions that you can take from the MEMCM admin console. So when you log into the Cloud Console, you pick a device, you derive specific actions like machine policy, user policy, and Microsoft is probably just going to go ahead and add more and more actions like software updates, app evaluation. What's going to happen is the Intune service that's on the left and top is going to go back to the gateway service. Gateway service will then reach out to your Config Manager, and Config Manager will then reach out to the device. So the point that I want to highlight over here is from the Config Manager and the client communication side, there's no change. Config Manager still communicates to client exactly the same way it has been doing for a long, long time. We're just extending the capability, the actions that you can take on Config Manager console today and making it available in the Cloud Console.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, probably, in my opinion, one of the most important points about Tenant Attach that makes it different and even more valuable, I think, to some degree, than co-management. And it's that you can extend your on-premises infrastructure to the cloud while making no change to the client side of things to make that work. And what's great about that is that means I can have a pointer, not expose because that's not the right word. I can have a pointer to my server objects in my Intune console, in my Cloud Console, the MEM Admin Center. But it's not actually that object, and I'm not talking directly to it. I'm talking through the gateway service, through the on-premises infrastructure to that server. So I get this, but I get all the cloud value while still protecting that on-premises resource by not actually exposing it to the internet. But where co-management and even Intune only allows me to manage my Windows 10 workstations, specifically in the Windows world, and I can't manage my servers, this allows me to now at least extend cloud management functionality for my server devices. And so I think that's a huge win for folks who are trying to, manage your devices from anywhere, or get rid of the need for always having to have a config manager console. Or I know there's lots of folks that they don't allow you to run the config manager console outside of a jump server or something. So you can't have it installed on your workstation your daily driver. You have to always be remoting into a server that's local and secure. Well, Tenant Attach allows you to expose functionality without actually exposing your infrastructure. And I think it's a fantastic value.
Yeah. So Adam, you made 2 points that I want to bring up. One is exposing. When we talk about exposing, I will talk about in the future slides the network part of it. So yes, we are making these capabilities available, but there would be people who would be curious about, hey, what ports would I really need to open? Because there's a gateway service communicating back to my config manager. So I'm going to touch that. And another thing that I'm going to touch in the next slide is what operating systems are supported, right? Specifically, like you said, in the Windows world. So again, similar to what we did in the co-management section, talk about something very basic. So, okay, let's say people say, this looks great. I will get some new capabilities without having to actually bringing up new infrastructure. What do I need to, what prerequisites I need to make sure are ready to enable tenant attach? So it's pretty simple. Again, slide talks about it. It says you have to have, from the Azure side, you have to have Azure running in the public cloud, and very specific, you have to have a global admin account when you are enabling tenant attach. So we're going to talk about this, and we're going to also talk about why do you need a global admin account.
But only when enabling it, not when actually using it. So don't freak out, just when enabling.
That is correct. Once it is enabled, it creates its trust at the back end, and we do not save the credentials. So that's completely fine. Config manager side, the config manager build has to be 2002 or newer. Okay. The next one is Azure AD or AD user discovery enabled. So what we used to have in the config manager, it was needed to have AAD user discovery and AD user discovery enabled. But in the latest build of config manager, Microsoft has changed it and says you can have one of the two discoveries enabled, and that's going to be fine. It's all documented. From the Intune, again, the tenant, similar to the Azure tenant, you need to have the Intune tenant residing in the public cloud, and now comes the client side. Now, client could be any supported config manager client operating system. So what it means is Windows Server is also supported for tenant attach. 8.1 is also supported. I hope you don't, but if you do have Windows 7, I do know some customers, some organizations that I work with still have some Windows 7, which they're migrating to the latest Windows 10. But if you still have Windows 7, that will work as well. And I believe I still today have a Windows 7 machine just for this demo purpose. How if it is managed by config manager, you can still take that, and tenant attach is going to upload the information of that Windows 7 machine and server operating systems into the cloud console.
Yeah, and the reason that works is because it's still, all that's required is it just needs to be able to run the config manager client. Tenant attach isn't doing anything to the client. It's native client functionality. If the client works, then it should work with tenant attach.
Right. Now, okay, that comes to the next requirement. A lot of you would be wondering, what about the network, right? So, important bit, there is no incoming port that needs to be open to make this capability work, make this tenant attach be enabled. So, there used to be in the documents, in the Microsoft documents, there used to be these 4 gateways that were published initially saying, hey, config manager server should be able to access these 4 endpoints. Now the documents are updated and all the way down are added. Now it says *manage.microsoft.com. So all the endpoints that are Intune specific needs to be accessed. And it's not so much because there are new endpoints. It's just that if anything changes because there are new capabilities, new gateways, it would just be covered by one change once it is outgoing, very, very specific outgoing endpoint. Outgoing port is open from the server, from the config manager server.
So Ravi, just a quick question around this. So I said that the HTTPS.
Yeah.
What happens if a customer has HTTPS inspection on?
It should still work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that should still work.
I know it's a wildcard question, but it's something that we run into a lot with Intune and Autopilot, where customers have those HTTPS inspections and it causes issues.
Excitable security teams.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in this scenario, so long as your certificate's on the config manager server, that shouldn't be a problem, is my understanding.
Yes.
Yes. The other question is more a self-serving one. I don't see an Australian or an Asia Pac gateway.
Okay, so that is correct. So currently, the Microsoft built gateway only in 2 data centers. One is the US and one is the EU. And again, Microsoft says they're not really saving any information in those gateway servers, right? They are just a proxy that would take and make the communication work between the 2 servers. But yes, you're right. There is.
I'm assuming that's just around optimization, right? They're the 2 largest regions, so let's try to leverage that first.
Correct. Yep. And there is one more thing, that even though there are 2 gateway servers, I could not find a way, and I do not know any way of you from the console or from the configuration side being able to choose that I want my config manager to only go through the US or through the EU. You can do things from the network side, right? You can hack things and make it work, but the config manager server itself does not give you, the console, the wizard does not give you an option to choose, hey, I want US or EU gateway. No,
I believe at that point they become unsupported workarounds.
That is correct. if it then stops working for whatever reason, it is.
You're on your own. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm looking at the docs, and interestingly, which by the way we'll link below, but they don't have the gateways, those gateways listed out. Interestingly,
anymore. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying. So we did have the first 4 the endpoints as the listed gateways, but Microsoft changed it, and all the way down is what the only you're going to probably, if you're looking at the latest docs, yes, it would be latest. You're going to see *manage.microsoft.com is what needs to be opened out. Yeah.
Cool.
Correct. You're right.
And what's also great is that so if you go to Config Manager 2010, they have an internet access, check internet access option, and or validate internet access. And so you can now check to see if it can access all of those settings whenever, or those locations, endpoints, when you're going to set up Tenant Attach. So I think that's pretty cool.
That is correct. That's correct. Cool. So that's all. That's all the prerequisites. You need to make sure that the config manager is in the right version. You need to make sure that the outgoing ports are all open. And again, the outgoing should not be a problem. That's pretty much it. And you're ready to enable it. Okay. If you are ready to enable it, how do you do it? Now, if it is a config manager environment where co-management is already enabled, when you go into the administration, you go to the config manager node, cloud service and co-management node, you're going to find the object that says co-management settings. When going into the production window comes up, and if it is, like I said, in 2002 or above, there would be a tab that says configure upload. You click on configure upload, you check the box, and it says which devices do you want to upload to Intune database. So you can start with saying, I want to pretty much enable all the devices right, file, which you probably wouldn't do it. For a lot of organizations wouldn't do it. Or you can pre-create a collection, a pilot collection, or test collection, whatever you want to call it, and only select to upload the information of those devices. You browse to it, you click on it, and click on apply. It is going to ask you for a username and password. And once it is being provided, that's pretty much it. So you're not bringing up any new server. You're not bringing up another connector. You're still same config manager infrastructure. If you had 30 servers, you still have 30 servers. It will just enable Tenant Attach. What it does,
Ravi, I'll stop you one moment here. So there's a new a newer feature that's not in your screenshot there. That's the endpoint analytics.
Correct.
And one point to note, because you'll see it in the docs when you're going through this, but we ran into this. So my server guy called me one day and said, "Hey, I'm seeing this other service on our machines. I can't remember what the name of it is, but there's a new service that gets added when you enable endpoint analytics. That's this." Gosh, I wish I could remember what it's called. Anyway, it was giving him trouble. He was like, "Hey, I'm seeing spikes in CPU usage on this, and it's giving me trouble uninstalling. Where did this come from?" And so we started digging, and we discovered that when you enable endpoint analytics, if you're also uploading all of your devices to Tenant Attach, they also get that's all the checkbox says: enable endpoint analytics for devices uploaded to Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So anything that goes up, you get endpoint analytics. So then it's turning on this extra service that's collecting data and sending it up, telemetry data for those devices. So just for full disclosure there, just be careful if you've got concerns about telemetry data and things like that, and you don't want your server data, but you're okay with Workstation, carefully consider which devices you target for this.
That's correct. Ben, you had another question?
I did, sorry. Just with the, I mean, I've got a million questions now that Adam started talking about stuff. When you said that, so when you go through this process and it asks for a username and a password, I'm assuming that's the global admin account that we were talking about. Yep. Okay. So once it makes that connection, is it essentially just doing, and feel free to tell me if this is way too off track, but is it creating it like a managed service account, or how is it storing that information?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So we're going to talk about this. So I'm going to answer your question as much as I can, but I will also hold the information that I'm covering in the next few slides, right? So as soon as you click on apply, it's going to go and get authentic. Of course, it's going to need an authentication from your Intune tenant and Azure Active Directory. You're trying to enable it, and that's when you put in your username and password. So the credentials are not really saved anywhere in the config manager. It is only used one time, and then it uses a mechanism that we're going to talk about in the future slides.
Cool.
That allows config manager and Intune to communicate back and forth from there on. So the first point is, yes, it is used for authentication. Once it is authentication, some things happen at the back end, which will allow it to communicate in the future for future communications, and the username and password will not be required. And if the password is changed, even I get this question, what if I change the password? No, it's not going to break. The Tenant Attach is not going to break, even if the password has changed.
So just to be clear, then it's using your account to create. I guess the question is it a service principal that it's creating, or is it a managed service account that it's creating?
Yeah, it is an app. It is creating an app, enterprise application.
Cool.
Azure Active Directory, which would then be used.
Yeah, that's fine. That makes sense.
So
So I'm sorry, Ravi. I'm gonna have to derail us back on the. Okay, so I spoke up and then I should have kept my mouth shut. Okay, so it's called the sensor framework. Is the functionality that gets enabled. However, don't panic. It is a client setting that you can configure. So if you have separate client settings applied to your servers than what you have applied to your workstations, that is how you can limit the telemetry data for server devices going to, so you can enable Tenant Attach for all your devices to enable that functionality. But if you choose to then enable endpoint analytics, you can then configure client settings and target those policies differently. So, all right. Anyway, carry on.
No, that's a very good point. So, Adam, what we're going to do is, like I said, when we started talking about this, I said in my test environment, I have Tenant Attach disabled. So yes, we will see that new capability at the bottom. That's a checkbox. I'm going to show that and say really what it does, right? And then we can go back and talk about the client setting as well, how you can enable or disable it. So we can all do that. So it's a really good point that you bring it up. So that's one way of enabling Tenant Attach when you have co-management already enabled. But obviously, if you do not have co-management enabled, you're going to run the wizard, the same wizard that we talked about in our last session, in our last video about the co-management. So you go into the console, you go into the administration cloud services, you right-click on the co-management, and you start the wizard. So when you start the wizard, the first screen that's going to come up is again going to ask you for sign in. You still need to provide the same global admin privilege account, and then there will be 2 checkboxes. Now, the first checkbox is what is going to enable Tenant Attach. Just says upload to MEM Admin Center. When you're going to go next, it's going to also give you that checkbox that Adam was talking about the endpoint analytics. Now, here comes Ben's question, right? Once you provide it at the back end, when you log into Azure Active Directory and look for applications, this is where you see the application. So it's basically you're going to see ConfigMgr microservice, and you're going to see ConfigMgr SVC and really long string. Now that long string gets created when you enable Tenant Attach. Now in the environment that you can see the screenshot from, the Tenant Attach was enabled twice. So you enable it, you disable it. Ideally, you should go back and clean it up. Again, it's a lab environment. You went back, disabled and enabled it, and you see it twice. So this is what is going to then save the information that's going to communicate back and forth. Again, interesting stuff, right? Now, this is what it is. How do I know what's really happening at the back end? Like, how do I troubleshoot? I'm a config manager admin. I'm so used to seeing the logs. So yes, there is a specific DLL and specific log that DLL does the activity, has all the codes, and there is a log that actually puts all the information in a log file. So when you click on apply, the config manager service is going to go back and talk to the gateway service, right? It's going to pick one of the 2 gateway services. And you can see it when I was doing it, it actually picked the US gateway service. It says get location US, and it went ahead and authentication is happening and gets a 200. Once it is done, once it has been decided that it is going to communicate with one of the 2 gateway services, it is going to start batching all the device information. So in my tenant, or the screenshot where it was taken from, there were only 4 devices in the collection, in the test collection. Config Manager then took all those information of those 4 machines, put that into a batch, and went back and started syncing the information. And you can see that worker CM Gateway upload is finished processing. So what it means is it has finished. And how often does it do it? It uploads the information every 15 minutes. So if you have made changes to your collection, expect the information to be up in the Intune console within 15 minutes, right? How do you, if it's your test environment, you can't wait even 15 minutes, just go ahead and restart the service. You can restart the thread, you can restart the service. Sorry, you can restart the config manager service, and it's going to say, okay, right after it starts all the services, it's going to go ahead and sync that information of new machines or removed machines.
And one thing to point out on that log name is it's the CM Gateway, the Config Manager Gateway. It's not the same as the CMG logs, which when you're staring at logs, it gets confusing because they're both named very similarly, but they're not the same. So do not be confused there. That's the CM Gateway.
Yes, that is not CMG Gateway. CM Gateway Sync Upload Work. Correct. Now, what really happens once it is uploaded? So once you log into your Intune console, you're going to have these specific devices, which will say is managed by Config Manager. Now, these are the devices that are uploaded, were part of that collection, right? And you see these co-managed devices. So when you click on Config Manager, any of the Config Manager managed devices which are uploaded because of Tenant Attach capability, you're going to see the actions that or the informations that are synced from Config Manager database and the actions that you can perform, which are config manager specific. Now, what if a device is co-managed already, right? So let's say if there are some Windows 10 machines which are already co-managed, and you host which you enable Tenant Attach, which we're going to do again in our demo. Intune is smart enough. There is logic that says, hey, I'm not going to go ahead and create 2 entries. So if there is Win10.01, which is already present in Intune database because of co-managed, yes, it will. For a couple of minutes, you're going to see 2 Win10.01. One will say co-managed and the will say config manager. However, within a couple of minutes, you will see that the entries are merged, and you will see just one entry, which will still say co-managed, but when you click on it, you're going to see that information. Okay, so let's really see, let's visualize what happens. So you click on one of these machines, which is synced, which is not co-managed, but is synced because of the Tenant Attach, enabling Tenant Attach. This is what you're going to see. You will be able to see the information that came from Config Manager. You will be able to see hardware information. This is, again, some analytics, but Resource Explorer, this is exactly the same Resource Explorer that you have in Config Manager. Client details, all the information coming from Config Manager. Collections, exactly what collections are this is this machine part of? You're going to see that. Application deployed to this machine as an available app, you're going to see that. Scripts that are deployed to this machine, you will be able to see that. You can also sync machine policy, user policy, and app evaluation today. And if it is a co-managed device, this is what's going to happen. You can see how. So
wow, that's a whole lot more actions.
Exactly, the capability keeps on increasing. You get more and more control, all in the Cloud Console. So you can see now on the left-hand side in the monitor, you see scripts, which is Config Manager, plus managed apps, which is Intune. So it is all extended. You see all the capabilities.
I have a question. I'm hand up.
Sure.
The applications preview, is that the software inventory from Config Manager?
No, that is the available application that you have deployed to the machine.
And you can right-click and say install application from there.
We're going to see that. We're going to see that in demo. So
but
these are
the important thing to keep in mind here is that all of the tenant attached, or almost all the tenant attached data, is queried live from your Config Manager instance the moment you access like Resource Explorer or client details or timeline. That data is not stored in the cloud. It is triggering a call through the gateway to Config Manager to the admin service and pulling that data back live. So there's a little bit of a delay, but it's live data and it's not stored in the cloud. So it doesn't exist to attempt to access. It's like Schrodinger's cat.
But by live, you mean live from your Config Manager server, not live from the client computers. That's correct.
Sorry. Yes, good.
Because I was going to say, wait, what if that client device is off?
Sorry.
So there is
as live as you're used to it being in Config Manager.
Sure.
So let me add a bit more detail onto it, right? So yes, it is live. It's stored in cloud for some time, but it is live, like Adam said, right? It's pulled from Config Manager. But if you talk about like CMPivot, when you go to CMPivot and you say IP config, this is a live connection to the client. This is not the live connection that is going to the Config Manager. Right. You are literally cloud, which is cloud part of the solution, which is Intune, is going to go and talk to Config Manager. Config Manager will then run a query, CMPivot query, to the machine live to get the IP address.
Yeah.
The machine in that case has to be online.
Sure. That makes sense.
Yep. And the same,
it's still proxying the traffic. It's your Intune is not talking to the device. Intune is going through the gateway to Config Manager to the device and back. It's still got a middleman here. That's the
technically two middlemen.
I'm going to keep beating that horse because it's important to recognize that there's a difference here. It's not
webhooks is what you're after.
It's not talking. No.
Correct. So so let's say if you go when you click on 3 dots, you also see the 3 Config Manager actions that you can run. So let's say if you pick one of the actions, you want to run machine policy or user policy or any of those actions that you have available. What really happens? these are the 5 stages that it goes through, right? It goes through memAdmin console, sends instructions for triggering machine policy. That's what we are talking about. ConfigMgr is going to receive that notification through the gateway and will authenticate. Now, there is one important bit that I want to talk about is authenticate, right? Now, here's what happened. So I was talking to one of the customers and says, hey, does it mean now, okay, for that specific customer, there was a mobility team and Windows team. They want to enable it, but they were like, does it mean my mobility engineers will be able to just install applications, run machine policy and user policy, be able to see this information? No, this is what I want to talk about. So when you talk about authenticate, the config manager has already received it. Just look at that. Config manager server receives the notification, right? It's actually authentication and authorization, I should say. Authorization is an important bit. So if a mobility engineer tries to run an action, let's say if they can see the data and tries to run an action, but mobility engineer is not in the config manager database configured as an admin, right? Config manager will see that information and will truncate right there. It will halt. So the RBAC role, the very important bit, the RBAC role that you have configured in config manager will continue to be adhered, will still be in place even after you enable tenant attach. Okay,
Awesome.
That's what authentication. Yes, the user will be able to authenticate because it's a proper valid user, but the authorization is going to fail. If the authentication and authorization has been completely done, the user is part of the config manager admin users, then the information will be sent to BGB.
Does there need to be
for the viewers? It's RBAC is role-based access control. Just in case you haven't heard the abbreviation before.
And then the other question is, you're saying admin, but it's delegated permissions, correct? So delegated permissions to that resource.
Correct.
Because you may have a group of admins that only have access to a select range of your devices, and they'll only be able to access that same thing up in the Intune portal, is how I'm interpreting what you're saying there, Ravi.
That is correct, Stephen. So it's not just mean config manager admin, it's any user who's got the access, delegated access to be able to view and run machine policy, user policy, or any of those actions.
Yeah,
Yep.
so you don't get any extra control that you
Yep.
like. It should match. The control you have in the cloud should match the control you have on-prem.
So what you're saying is, if they've got access to rerun applications or view applications, they'll be able to do that in Intune. But if they don't have permission to run, say, CMPivot, they won't be able to run CMPivot.
They will not be able to do that. Correct.
Awesome. Perfect. Just to be very clear for everybody.
Yes, that's a good thing. So once it has been received, authenticated, authorized, then the information will be sent to BGB. BGB is a component that, again, in this case, is going to send the information to client to run machine policy. Config manager server sends information to the client. Client receives that and initiates the action that's been sent. So this is what happens. So click on the 3 dots, click on sync machine policy. It's going to say app evaluation cycle initiated. And this is back to Adam's point. This is all happening live. Intune is going to reach out to the gateway. Gateways will reach out to the console or config manager service. Config manager service will do it. And once it is done, it's going to say sync machine policy complete. I'll do this in my lab and show you. It doesn't take too long for this entire cycle to complete, even though there are many hops, but it is still pretty quick. Now you can see this all happening in log. There's nothing that you can't monitor in config manager. So yes, you can see all of these small actions happening, flow happening in the log, and you can pick exactly if it fails, if it errors out, you can find out exactly where it failed. So in the CMJ gateway notification worker, this is where it receives the information from the gateway service. You can say it has received it from the US gateway authenticating web service. And once it is done, successfully validate the service signature. So this is where it's going to validate and authorize and then forward. Oh, sorry, there is a word, authorize, sorry. Authorized to perform client action. If it is not authorized, it's going to fail. Authorization fail is the error you're going to get. And then the information will be sent to BGB. Now, BGB server will receive it and will reach out to the client in as in live in real time and get the action done. This is what you see on the machine, on the client itself, on the policy agent, that it has received a machine policy request and it's going to initiate the machine policy. That's pretty much it. Like we can keep on talking about now how other actions work, but instead of just talking through this, I want to do some demo as well now. So,
and Ravi, just as we go on, the one thing I'll point out is that the only thing that's new in this mix, when you look at those log files, is the CM Gateway notification service. The other service, the BGB and the client side logs, would show the same exact actions if you're triggering those same, like a machine policy eval from the console as a client action. It's doing exactly the same functionality there. And it's just you're only adding that one extra hop of it proxying that traffic through the gateway.
That's correct. Yeah. Well, good point. So what I want to show is just some of the things. So this is what my I should probably close. Yeah. This is my Intune console. This is what it looks like if I go into devices, go into Windows devices. These are the number of devices you can see. All of these devices are either Intune managed or co-managed once it comes up. And what I'm going to do, okay, so you can see co-managed, Intune managed. So sort out. But what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go ahead and enable Tenant Attach. Now, again, as you can see, the co-management is already enabled by look of devices being co-managed. So I would not run the visit. What I would do is instead, I'm going to, once I connect to my machine, I'm going to go to the properties of the existing co-management configuration, which is here, properties. It takes about 5 seconds or so to come up. And then I'm going to say configure upload. And we're going to see two things. One is, yes, we can enable upload, but this is the extra capability that Adam was talking about, which I haven't put in the, which was not in the deck. So if I click on that, it says, okay, upload to, so I also want to show you one thing since we are here. Let me bring that up.
And by the way, I love these learn more buttons that take you right to the docs.
Yeah.
They're just fantastic.
Okay, so what I want to show you is to Adam's point. Hey, Adam was talking about what really happens. Like, how is it going to create a service principal? Or so let's see that. So I don't remember how many times I've enabled and disabled it, but let's have a look. So if I go into enterprise application, and I'm going to look for the application that says config manager, starts with config manager. So application, show me. So you can, as you can see, I've done it a few times, right? So I should clean this up, but yes, I've done this a few times. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You see actually 6 application created. I'm gonna probably end up at the 7th one as well today. Yeah. So these are the services. I'm going to go ahead and click on upload. I do not want to enable endpoint analytics. Just want to keep it very simple. But I also want to do is I want to not enable it for my all devices, but only enable it for a collection. I've already created the collection, and this is the tenant attach. You can see there are 7 devices. So let's click on it and click on apply again. So once I click on apply, this is going to go.
Ravi, do you have any servers in that collection?
I do not have server, but I do have Windows 7 machine and some. Yeah, good point. We can add some servers as well. All right, let me see if I remember the password for this account. If not, I do know another account. Yeah, see, that should work. I think I remember the password for this one. Okay, so this is exactly, it says it is going to create an application. Are you sure? Do you want to proceed? And this is when it's going to say, is this account a global admin? I don't remember if it is a global admin. Either way, it will be a good demo.
We'll find out in a second.
We did. If it had failed, you would have already seen an error, but it actually, apply button is gone and everything is there. So this was a global admin account.
Yeah.
So now we can click on OK and just wait. Okay, it's not even going to wait for 15 minutes. The first time the sync happened right away. So let me just show you some of the things that I've actually pointed out so you can go back. So see, this is just one minute. So this is what I said. Everything that you can see over here, we're going to see that now. So, okay. So if I go back into logs, that's the notification. That's a sync uploader. So this is the time as well. Probably off, but let's see if anything happened in here.
Yeah, it updated when you clicked it.
Oh, okay, cool. So yes, it says 1:15 some time ago. Hasn't. Next run 1:30. CMG Gateway Sync Upload Worker. So it should sync soon. If not, I'm just going to restart the service and okay. All right, cool. So back to it. The service restarted, yes, and it says you can see it already. It's got a lot more information, a lot more activity than it was in past. So if you see, this is what it was doing every 15 minutes. It was just saying, okay, there's nothing to enable, right? But this time it says, hey, it is enabled. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to it. So this is the first endpoint that I put in that they show in the deck. It says gateway.configMgr. Once it talks and communicates back, and then it says, now I'm going to choose the somewhere here, as.gateway. It got AS as well now. And somewhere here, it's going to see the other gateways too, or it's just going to pick up.
So there is an AS.gateway. There you go.
Yeah, now. And this is the reason probably Microsoft has changed it. And instead of saying, I do not want to tell you how many gateway servers are there, just let us take care of it. And just you open asterisk.manage.microsoft.com. In past, again, in the screenshot you saw, there was US and EU. But now it's all just AS. And once it is done, you probably want to show you this. So there are 7 machines that it detected that it needs to upload and batched it. And somewhere here, you're going to see it successfully uploaded it. Verifying tenant. Actually, I did see it successfully uploaded the data to as.gateway. So and it did a post. So it says that yes. So if we go back to the Intune console and just refresh, this is what I had. Just do a refresh. I should actually be able to see more devices now.
Oh, yeah.
Momentarily. Yeah, it's going to get processed and then. Okay. All right. So this is definitely synced. Took longer than I would expect, but definitely not really long, as in because it took about 5 to 7 minutes. In a video like this, yes, it sounds like a really long time, but in production, that would be nothing, right? So yeah, so you can see all these devices are actually, most of those devices were already there. So these are the Intune managed devices. These are co-managed devices. But hey, look, there's actually a config managed device as well. So since it clicked anyway, so back to when I was talking through the deck, I actually showed you that a device could be co-managed on config manager managed only, no co-management. And once it is synced up, you can actually see hardware information, user experience, Resource Explorer. This is literally the Resource Explorer that you would see on the Config Manager console. Client details, timeline. I'm going to do a really nice demo of this that Microsoft has presented in past. But if I click on collection, it's going to go and get the information real time and find out all the different collections this machine is part of, and so forth and so on. So this is what Adam was talking about, Steve, that this is doing a query. This is literally connecting to Gateway,
nice.
Now AU Gateway, reaching out to Config Manager, pulling the information.
Now, Ravi, can you go open the AdminService.log?
I would be while you're doing that. Yeah.
This is the piece that is, I think, just awesome about all of this.
While you're doing that, though, I'd be curious to know when I go to developer tools in the console here, do I see that it's hitting my config manager service, or do I see that it's hitting the Intune?
Just to get back.
Yeah, you'd only see the initial request, and then the gateway would do the rest.
Yeah. So when I clicked on this, it did a real-time query and showed me the information. So information was not already saved. This is what Adam was talking about. However, now once this information is there, if I click on somewhere else, come back, it's going to be there for some time, and
it caches it for a bit.
Caches it, and you can always do a refresh, and it will then do a real-time query again. So this is exactly it. It's pretty much real time for most part. Sorry, Adam, you wanted to show the
open the AdminService.log.
And this is where you're going to see the information.
So now, if you're familiar with using the SMS prov log, SMS provider log, and whenever you're trying to figure out like what query's been run or what WMI calls are happening in your console or in your environment, you can watch that log. Well, this is the replacement equivalent of that, which is what shows what the admin service is doing. And the admin service is the web enabled SMS provider. And so this is going to eventually replace the WMI, or it's slowly replacing WMI as the provider. And so
WMI for life.
Yeah. So so here's what's great. So if you go down 5 lines to that processing incoming request for resource. So copy that. I'm pointing at my screen as if you can see it. Copy everything in between the brackets.
Yeah.
And you can get all of everything in,
till
to true. There you go. Yep. Copy that and then open a browser. And hopefully this works. And you can dissect that query because it's just using an OData string, but it will. This should contact your admin service. Now you have to do this on premises for this function because this is your local resource.
Correct. Yeah.
But so hit go on that and see if it does anything.
This is not going to work because this is not on premise. But I would need to do that on prem. So I would need
to so can you do it back on the server itself?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what. Yeah. All right. So I know that there's probably lots of folks that are like, move on from this, but like to me, this is like the framework that all this is built on, and if you're trying to understand how this stuff works, it's amazing because you can go and just watch, and you can. Now I can take this and I can dissect it and say, okay, well, let me figure out other bits and pieces. Good job, Ad. Well done.
So this is actually going through a lot of authentication and other things.
Nice. Oh, wow.
So this is where it's showing the RBACs functionality, why it's so important to make sure that you've got all your authentication working correctly.
Well, and admin service natively doesn't care, but here's what's cool. This is the JSON blob that got sent to Intune. So when you clicked on the collections button, it called that admin service query, and this is the JSON that got sent back to Intune to produce the content that you see in the console. So I know it's really trivial, but I think it's interesting to know that that's this is what's going on. So then if you Ravi, if you just take the edit the URL and take off everything after the 88, so after the device ID, right in the first part here. So right there, just delete all of that. So hit enter there, and this should load the entire device object from ConfigMgr. So this would be equivalent to going to VR system in the ConfigMgr database or SMSR system or whatever. So this is your device object, and you can see all the pieces. So this is. And the more you can dig with it, there's a ton of information in here. But actually, one more thing. Sorry, because I love this. The admin service is like the best thing ever. So delete device. I'm going to derail us for a moment.
The entire.
All right. So delete device and the ID, all that, and hit enter here.
Oh, this is.
And so this shows you several of the items, the entities that you can query against. And so these are all like the new pieces that are coming in. And so like script and CMPivot and things like that, you can actually, when you go call CMPivot, we should come back and look at the log because you can see how CMPivot gets called through the admin service. And so let's say you want to then figure out, well, how do I write this myself if I want to do this in PowerShell or something? You can watch that admin service log and do it yourself. So anyway, hopefully some folks find some value in that, because I geek out over it for sure, as you can probably tell.
This is definitely good. This just shows all the new endpoints that you can use to access the ConfigMgr database. And yes, Stephen, it was still the same username and password, which was still going through the role-based access permission. So that's the reason. If I would put a cloud-based username and password over here, it's never going to connect, because ConfigMgr doesn't know those cloud users. So that makes probably a lot more sense now after Adam took us through this. All right, cool. So where were we? Back to the
So you were going to do the CMPivot demo from the admin console.
Yes, we will do the CMPivot demo, but I do want to show a few other things. Yeah, so this was the real-time query. It's in the browser for some time, but you can do CMPivot, CMPivot, and this will be real-time as well. Now, for this, the machine has to be online. So I just need to make sure I'm picking up the right machine. The machine has to be online. It's connected to the internet. But let's, before we go into actually deep into that, so what I want to do is, you can see all these information. The second thing is, that was ConfigMgr managed machines, right? Sorry, I do that all the time. ConfigMgr managed machines. But if you take co-managed machines and just click on that, and you're going to see the capability should come. Not yet. This probably hasn't synced, but those there was not. This machine is probably not part of the Tenant Attach. So let's try Citrus Pro 3. No, not yet. I'll have to go back and see which machines are part of those. Oh, there it is. This is a good example. This machine is part of the pilot Tenant Attach collection. And that's why you can see all the co-managed capabilities. You can see also machine policy sync, and plus you can see all the ConfigMgr plus co-management Intune capabilities. So definitely, if you want to enable both co-management and Tenant Attach. They give you both different capabilities. It's not one or the other. Now let's do the demo that Adam was talking about. So let's first go back and find out a machine that's actually running. Start with, not that one. So let's going to go back, go to the console, go into co-management. No, so let's go into the Tenant Attach collection first.
Yeah, so that Win10 AADJ one was online.
Yeah. So you can see this one is online. Win10. Yeah, I'm just finding the machine, just making sure it's online. So active. Let's find out this one. Win10 DJ01. Win10 DJ01. Yep, ConfigMgr is there. Okay. We'll need to pause the video for some time because the service is not behaving good today. Win10 DJ01 should say it is co-managed. Still says Intune.
Well, no, that's not. That's DJ01. You're looking at AADJ01,
which is
not there.
Not there.
Yeah, that's not there. Win10 AADJ01. Let's see. First name. No, that's a different one. Yeah, that's why. It's working. Sorry, my bad. It is definitely working.
This is the story of our lives here.
Just a different naming convention. That's confusing.
You've got to follow naming conventions, Ravi. It's really important.
Just use random names.
Problem is, it changes every time you build a stupid machine.
That's what happens. That's what happened. That's what really happened. So anyway,
Create a separate autopilot policy for every device so it has the right name every time.
Exactly. That's perfect. All right. When are we going to jump back in? Now?
Yep.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. I'm just probably going to leave this in because this is fun.
Okay. So you can see that this is the device which is co-managed, and Tenant Attach now is online. That's a device co-managed, and because you can see all these different capabilities, let's start with something very, very simple, right? Adam suggested do a CMPivot. So click on CMPivot. You can do lots of queries, but simplest one I can think of right now is ipconfig. So this is real time. So
Yeah.
this is going to go to Gateway. Gateway is going to reach out to ConfigMgr. ConfigMgr is then going to use BGB, the other CMPivot services, and going to get the information. Now, here's what it becomes awesome from being going to even better. Now, if this machine was not connected to intranet, it is right now, but if this machine was not connected to intranet and was connected or was communicating to ConfigMgr through CMG, this is the flow would look like. Intune reaching out to the gateway service. Gateway service will reach out to ConfigMgr. ConfigMgr knows that it is communicating through CMG. So ConfigMgr will then go back to cloud, which is CMG service. CMG service will reach out to the client and then come back all the way. So now think about it. It's not at all network related. As long as the device is connected to internet, this is going to work. The device doesn't have to be connected to intranet. The user doesn't have to be connected to intranet. They just need internet. Yes, of course, you do need that level of security where second factor authentication certificate, whatever other mechanism that needs to be used to ensure that the communication is secured and encrypted and everything else. But the entire solution is not bound to a physical network. It's just going to work everywhere. And that's what I do. I normally show that this Intune tenant, the one that I'm logged into, is in Singapore. My ConfigMgr service server is hosted in Sydney, Azure data center. And I have this VM hosted on my machine. So when I initiate this action for a machine which is actually connected to my hosted in my physical machine, Singapore tenant, which is Intune, which is based in Singapore, is going to go to the Cloud Gateway Service, CMGateway Service, and then it's going to go to ConfigMgr, which is Azure. From there, it's going to go back to CMG, and then come to the machine, which is hosted here. So it would just work fine. But again, back to this you can see the IP addresses there. You can find disk configuration. You can look for BitLocker. You can think of anything. You can find installed applications or specific registry key. CMPivot is great now, but it takes a while to do those jumps, probably about a minute or so. But I'm not going to spend any more time. One example is enough. The other is going to be the same. What I want to do next is show you timeline. This is again another really, really good. So I want to start with something filter, right? What is timeline? So timeline is come back source name. So timeline within Tenant Attach is a capability where Intune can, again, in real time, go to the ConfigMgr client and bring in these event logs. Now, which event logs? Well, the event logs where the source name is this, can bring in there and summarize it and show you. Now, and I can click on that. That's fine. I want all the sources. I don't want it. But when I click on not refresh sync, it is going to bring those events, and you can see that here. So if I click on sync, it is going to go to that device. The device has to be online. It's going to take those events. So now if you think of device reboot, device installing application, device installing updates, all those informations are just going to up here. Application being updated from ConfigMgr, all this information will be up here. If you're thinking of a help desk scenario, a help desk doesn't need to connect to the machine anymore. This could be logging into sync status is finished. Now I just need to click on refresh, and all the information should be at the bottom. in a moment. Oh, this device hasn't been on for a while. This is not really a good example, but let me see if I can actually do this. See if there is any more information. Yeah, no, this is not a good example. But what it shows you is that you have the capability to see all the information in just the Intune tenant, and you can just click on sync, and it's going to go and get those information in real time. What I'm going to do now is just to summarize. I'm going to show a video that Microsoft has demonstrated in past in some events, right, to show the real capability of the tenant attach and co-management at the same time. So in the demo, again, this is a user Jack. Jack's very unhappy because his machine is not working properly. He's working from home for like a lot of us, and he's not very tech savvy. An app that he needs to work on is crashing, right? Jack wants to call help desk, so he picks up the phone, calls help desk, and Scott, just random name, Scott's from help desk, who is also working from home, is not having a great day. His corporate machine's hard drive failed, so he's working from a secondary device. So he's not working from a corporate device, and he needs to help Jack. So Jack, they start talking, and once they start talking, Scott's asking him question, hey, so by the way, Scott already knows Jack's username, so it just goes into the Intune portal, finds the Jack's account, clicks on that, and without asking anything, now Scott knows Jack's account, computer name, is it co-managed, is it Azure AD managed. He can click on it and start getting the information. So you can see that the ownership is corporate. That's the serial number. The device is compliant. It's a virtual machine because it's a demo, but you can click on client details and get all the other boundary groups information. Is it connected right now? Is in the network issues? What management point it is connected to? So you can see that's connected to the CMG. It's online right now. It's co-managed. So you can see all this information without Scott having to ask or help desk having to ask any of those questions, which used to be the case in past. All this information is available. Goes for the timeline. The timeline ran in parts, so there is some information. As you can see, there is boot information, Windows error information. This can be filtered as I was doing. Just going to click on this so that goes away. Yeah. So you can see the help desk user, Scott, went in past as well, and there was an information update being installed. So when the specific KB got installed, an application is crashing. So this is what he's talking about, right? Application crash. There was an abnormal shutdown. So all this information is available to help desk without having to ask anything. Now, he does a sync and again gets the latest information. So the last information was from 147. This is not 147, it's probably sometime later. So he gets the more information, the current information similar to what I did. And within a couple of seconds, you're going to see that the new events are populated in the Intune console. And he finds that, yes, there is an application that is crashing. Without asking anything, you can see bugger.exe is the application. That's the version number of it. And guess what? They know how to fix it. There is already a script that's been created and deployed in ConfigMgr, and it's sitting in available state. So they've picked that script, and Scott runs it. It says fix bugger that app. They fix a registry, fix file app. It could be anything, but it's just a partial script. Now sitting on secondary device, not connected to corporate network, he was able to run a script that is hosted in ConfigMgr, and the user could be sitting intranet or internet or at a beach, just doesn't matter as long as the user's device has internet. You can see the script is running real time. It's going to come back and give you status that, hey, the script is already ran successfully. The app's fixed. It could have been any solution. It could have been updating an application. It could have been uninstalling, reinstalling application. Now, another thing, Jack says, hey, that's great, thank you. And it says, while I have you here, can you also install an extra application for me? It says it's a designing app. So sure, I can. It's an available app again. And Scott goes into the applications. Again, the applications are made available through ConfigMgr, clicks on it, this is real time going and talking to the ConfigMgr agent and downloading and installing the application. And not only that, it's bringing the state message and status messages that's in ConfigMgr up into the Intune console and showing you if the application was installed. So Scott, who's working from secondary device, was able to log onto a browser, do second factor authentication, and get all these help desk action done without having to ask any question, without having to connect to the user's machine. So this shows the capability of Tenant Attach, how these new capabilities will get highlighted. And again, you can start going into collections and CMPivots if it's really needed to find out the disk size, if there's specific free space available, to other troubleshooting without connecting to the device. I guess
a couple of just points to clarify on this, just to be sure. So the device has to be able to talk to ConfigMgr for these things to work, or for the live components. So like timeline or install applications and things. So if it's an internet only device, you need to have your CMG with co-management in order for that communication to occur. So the technician working can basically be on any device that they can open a web browser on, unless you've got some weird conditional access enabled that won't allow them to do that. But I can do this from my home computer if I can log into my tenant from home. But just know that it doesn't magically like fix the connectivity component of this. Your device still has to meet minimum criteria. It has to be able to, in this case, it's still, because this all needs to talk to your ConfigMgr environment, your devices need to be online and talking to your ConfigMgr environment, either on-prem or VPN or Cloud Management Gateway.
Yeah, that's correct.
For the live components.
Yeah. So some of the other components like hardware inventory, that is not coming from the client. So if I go back to my, so to Adam's point, if I go into Resource Explorer, and if I start seeing information, this is not really coming from the client itself. This is coming from ConfigMgr database. So for that, client doesn't need to be online, but everything else, yes, that I was talking about, deploying the application.
I mean, your ConfigMgr server needs to be online, but
yeah, correct. Really hope that is. Yeah. Cool. I guess that's pretty much it. Steve, Ben, any other question that you can think of?
No, I think this is just fantastic. From I mean, one of the big things that I get from just in my day-to-day experiences, a lot of people that work with Intune and ConfigMgr they really want a single pane of glass for full management of their environments, and they don't particularly, the end state of this is obviously hoping that it doesn't matter whether you're using Intune or Configuration Manager, that if we can manage it from a single place, it makes our lives better. And I just think this is fantastic.
Yeah,
it's a step in the right direction anyway.
Yeah, so just want to say one more thing. So I believe what Microsoft's intention going forward is, that I've heard in the past events and sessions, is the single pane of glass, in the sense that, and also Stephen put that something in the chat window as well. So if you create a policy, this is what Microsoft wants, is you create a policy from the Cloud Console and just don't have to worry about how the channel it takes and how it goes to the device. So the device could be managed by Intune or could be managed by ConfigMgr, right? The workload could be managed. It just wants to replicate what you're creating needs to go to the right resource, and through the right channel, it needs to go to the device. So currently, if you think of it, some workload could be managed by ConfigMgr, for which you need to create those applications and scripts on the ConfigMgr. There could be others, which is managed specifically by Intune, so you would still need to create those applications in ConfigMgr. But the way Microsoft wants to make it work is just create the policy in Intune console and let it do its magic, and deploy it through Intune or through MDM for Intune managed machines, and automatically replicate the policy to ConfigMgr database and deploy it to the clients, ConfigMgr clients to ConfigMgr. So literal single pane of glass. You would not have to create the policy twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the not having to worry about what channel it's using, the best, like thinking about CMPivot, and if I've got an Azure AD only device that's co-managed and connected through a cloud management gateway, so it's on the internet, no VPN, connected through cloud management gateway with co-management. If I run CMPivot against that device, my web-based console, so if I'm doing this from home, my web-based console will go over the internet through the gateway to the config manager box, which will then talk through the cloud management gateway to the internet-based client to run CMPivot, which will then return the path all the way back and give me the data. So I'm talking from one internet-based client to another internet-based client through my on-premises resources. And that's just kind of nuts to think that, but it's great because it just works, and you don't even, and it's fast. You don't have to think about it, but it's mind-boggling to know that all of those routes actually work and the data makes it back. It's pretty cool.
It is mind-boggling, right? So I think there's one interesting thing that I got today is there's also a lot of confusion. So to Adam's point, I think Steve and Adam and Ben, you guys should do a session for analytics, user analytics, device analytics, because there are different channels how the information goes in there. Just some suggestions for future sessions.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
Yep. Yeah, and even like I mentioned, the creating the policy and advertising through Tenant Attach. Go check out the docs. We'll link to them, and go check out Matt's video where he shows how to do this, because it's an extension of what we've just talked about today in a different way. So anyway, I think this is a good stopping point. Hopefully we've inspired some folks to go and enable Tenant Attach and go and poke around and see all the cool pieces here. And while you're at it, check out the admin service logs as you're clicking through these things. Write you some scripts. I've got code samples and things that I've done where I'm, trying to run these scripts over the internet to do these things. And it just works. It's fantastic. So thanks again for coming, Ravi. I'm sure we'll have you back on to cover some more of these awesome on-prem cloud value topics that we don't have the lab infrastructure to really cover very well. So thank you for volunteering to come and help us out.
No, it was definitely a pleasure.
Thanks, Ravi.
Yeah, no problem. Man. Cheers, guys.
Very much appreciated.
See you in the next round.
All right. See you next time.